Welcome to the Deschutes Public Library podcast. I'm your host, Michael Rivera, and today we're discussing what goes into managing the construction and renovation of every library across the Deschutes County district. I'm joined today by Greg Holcomb, a partner with Redpoint Construction Management, the firm responsible for managing the construction projects across our county. Greg, thanks for taking the time to join us today. With so many communities with unique needs across the library district, the library had to make a lot of tough decisions about which libraries to reconstruct, renovate, or build new. Can you give us a brief summary of what's happening at each of those libraries?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. As the planning process went on, they looked at all of the libraries that were existing in the district and what their current status was as far as their size, capacity, what they were serving as far as the communities, and what the age of the buildings were and the condition of the buildings and from when they were built and how they had aged, and how do we prepare them for their next life. With this bond measure, it's really meant to bring the district up current and set it up for the next 25 to 50 years of its existence. So when you take the branch libraries, and these are the ones that are located in Sisters, Sun River, La Pine, East Bend, they're smaller buildings and unique in their aspects as compared to the ones that are going to be in Redmond, Downtown Bend, and the new Central Library. So with the branch libraries, and that's Sisters, Sun River, and La Pine, we really looked at the size of the building and its current use is really fitting the communities, but wanted to refresh the building, bring it up current, give it new finishes, new shelving, new furniture. But also we really looked at the MEP system, so the mechanical system, the plumbing, electrical, to bring those up current. We're really striving for energy efficiency in our designs and our buildings. And a lot of the equipment that was in those buildings was aged. It had lived a lot of its life and was going to start running out and was older technology. And so we're really bringing everything up to new technology, new finishes. Same with furniture, shelving systems. And one of the components that is going into all of the libraries is children's learning. And it's an focused effort to really look at what are the elements that go in that really help to the process of children learning. And so there's a lot of components that are specialized. We brought in specialized designers and fabricators to create these elements that go into each of the libraries. And so those are all built into our process of how we address what's going on. So that's what's happening right now in the smaller branch libraries. We looked at the exterior components from a standpoint of refreshing paint, looking at light fixtures, replacing roofs, to make sure that they all had a long lifespan for the property. Same with the site improvements. We've done some new landscaping, new hardscape, bringing up current ADA codes, and just to really give that a refresh so it fits in with how the building is going to be used and occupied as we go forward. So you'll see those improvements as we have moved through. Exterior skins of the building, windows and the window systems. Some of them we've modified. We've dealt with some leaky windows and old windows to make sure that those are the things that we're taking care of now so that they don't become problems as we move on forward. So that's kind of where we're at with the branches. When we moved over to Redmond, Redmond is a new building. The old building was about half the size. The new building would be 40,000 square feet, two-story, very much almost the exact same size as downtown Bend is today. So very sizable, and it's because the community of Redmond has grown so much, and the demand for facilities are up there. And so we're going to see a much bigger footprint, a lot more capacity for the collection. There's going to be a lot of things, and this goes into all of the libraries, even the ones back in the small branches, is enhanced community rooms that can be used by the public as well as library functions and programs, but with high-end AV systems and communication systems for people to bring in their equipment, their whatever, it's your computer and that kind of stuff. A lot of meeting rooms. Those meeting rooms will have screens where people can plug into them and have conferences. Within the libraries, there's co-working areas, and these are areas that public can come in and have a little office space to work and do some projects when they can't do it at home or at their office, or they're traveling, whatever the situation may be. But it's a real collaborative, creative environment. And speaking of creative, there's creative spaces. And these are spaces that the library wanted to help promote their programs and things that they do with the community there within the library, whether it's a painting class or a creative pottery class or whatever they may come up with. And it's a very functional space to allow them to do different things, organize it different ways, set it up different ways. And it's these expanded features of what libraries can offer to the public, more beyond just the books and collection, which is a very big, important component, is the collections. We spend a lot of time talking about shelving and getting it right. And so this is really going through that. Within Redmond, it's a really beautiful building. And this is true of Stevens Ranch, the central library, is that we're using a mass timber construction. And so you can see it here in the building.
Yeah.
Big wood columns, big wood beams, the wood ceiling that is exposed and everybody can see it. It's called acoustical dowel laminated timber. It's DLT, and it comes with an acoustical property built into it. It's a very heavy structural timber wood floor system, and creates a lot of flexibility to have a wide open expanses. We also have access floor systems. And what that is it's a subfloor. And so all of the mechanical, the electrical, and everything runs in a cavity underneath the flooring. It creates flexibility so that future renovations can happen easier. They can move stuff around and still keep a wide open space for as much circulation as possible. So these are some of the components that we're really looking at. With the exterior skin, a lot of people see the renderings and they see, wow, there's a whole bunch of glass there. And in reality, there's glass, there's metal panels, there is brick veneer, all on these buildings. And this is all taken into consideration when we designed our mechanical system. So with the new buildings, one of the things that the library wanted to do was no fossil fuels, all electric service. And so we have designed these buildings this way, also with a photovoltaic or PV system for solar power, and with a goal of net zero. And that's, we will generate as much power as we use. So we won't be burdening the grid, and we will be supporting the grid from an electrical power source. But our design of the window systems, while it looks like it's a lot of glass in there, is actually, it's a thermal performance glazing system that the architect and the engineers developed to really work with our mechanical system to create a really efficient, energy-wise system. And that was our goals that DPL laid out for us, is to high energy efficiency and low energy cost with the PV system, and going away from any fossil fuels. And so those are goals that we set out. We're achieving them. They're working right on through. As we go into Central Library at Stevens Ranch, so that's on the east side of Bend. It's the new big library. And, it's 3-story versus 2-story. And it is about 100,000 square feet, 95,000 or so square feet in those 3 stories. And that library there, it has a lot of the same features, just more of it because of its size, its capacity. It has bigger community rooms, and these community rooms are divisible. So they have operable walls to split them up so that they can be used for 2 events at one time or one big event. And that's the same in Redmond as it will be in at the Central Library. And so these are these same types of systems are going into both buildings, and it allows both the buildings to function very similarly. They have some different looks in them because they are different buildings and different sizes, and they have very unique aspects to what the building is going to be. So I think there we really captured that side of town of where it's going. You know, we've looked at a lot of different locations trying to find the perfect spot. There is no perfect spot, but this is the best spot that we could find from a location standpoint. And Bend has grown so much, as we know, I mean, and continues to grow, just like Redmond is. And that's what's driving, why do we have this big building? It's because we're trying to get the capacity of the volume of the collection up, the services that can be provided. There'll be meeting rooms, tutor rooms, study rooms, conference rooms that the public can use. And there's a demand. I know as working on the projects, I have to schedule meetings and I have to get in there and try and find a spot in DPL system because they're always full.
Yeah.
And it's true. So there is the demand for that kind of stuff. I think the early learning things that we talked about for the small branches, they get enhanced in the bigger branches because we have more physical space, and we're setting those buildings up to be prepared for large volumes of the public coming in and enjoying them and spending their time there. So a lot of great features are going into the central library, much like the others, but still building on the same concepts. Again, mass timber, 100% electric power, 100% PV system that's going in for net zero. Both Redmond and Central are going to be LEED certified buildings. We have not determined the level that we will achieve, but we keep striving for the higher and higher. And so we're very excited about that because that's a goal that the community really shared out, that they wanted to see the district to pursue that. And so the board and DPL said, let's go after it. And so we are. And so that's something that's really built into our design and our project planning as it is right now. Downtown Bend, it's like, well, what's happening to that? One of the big things that happens with Downtown Bend is a lot of the administrative staff that are currently located in Downtown Bend move into the Central Library because it's consolidating a lot of the staff in the central location, which operationally is going to be more efficient for DPL because more staff will be in one spot. But it also frees up a lot of public space now. There's probably a third of that building currently devoted to functions, operational functions and administrative functions that will move to Central. And so there'll just be more space for the public, more meeting rooms. We're expanding that, a children's learning center, and then just expansion of the overall collection throughout Downtown Bend. We're not changing the exterior of Downtown Bend. That's going to stay just as it is. We may deal with some doors and things like that to help manage them. We're going to take a really in-depth renovation of the MEP systems, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, to really bring them up current. Again, just like we did in the small branches, we're doing it there because that's a big component. It uses a lot of energy. We want new energy efficient systems that's going to really perform well and create a great environment for all of the people. You know, with East Bend, we didn't really talk about it, but that's a smaller leased property that we're really looking at. How do we refresh that property, bring in some of these new ideas that we're creating elsewhere and applying it there? And that's with technology and with some of our early learning components and artwork. You know, throughout all of these projects, we're always, DPL in their own policies said, we will spend X amount of dollars on public art. Every one of these are going to have some incredible art pieces. Currently at Sisters, there's already a great art piece that's gone in, and there's more coming, a lot more coming as we go through all of these projects. And kind of a long overview, but it really hopefully captures kind of what we're doing and why.
Well, we're doing a lot, and I think that's the most important thing, and we're doing a lot for a lot of reasons. This is all based off of feedback that we gathered from the community. We got feedback from over 6,000 community members when we first initially were thinking about doing the bond. And things like the artwork in Sisters, for one, it's functional artwork, and two, it's very much part of Sisters. It's the artist was selected very carefully, and the artwork was, your team worked with the artist to make sure that it fit the community values, and it's supporting local artists, but it's also making it a nicer place to work and to learn. And when it comes to the building's efficiency, that ends up, the taxpayer's paying for all of this. Taxpayer pays the bill and foots the bill for everything that we do at the library. And so it helps, things like, having a very efficient building, having the coating on the glass, having a PV system that doesn't rely on any fossil fuels is just super important in keeping the cost down for the consumer. It's nice that it is super green, but it also just means that the building does not have to draw nearly as much on utilities to be operational. And my favorite part about this building is just how many windows it has, the views that you have. I mean, it really feels like you're in the heart of Redmond when you're sitting here looking out. Yeah. And I just think that's so special. And also, as a DPL employee, I get to see some of the older buildings on the inside and see some of the the problems. Right now, I work in the admin building that's across from downtown Bend, and that building was built in the 30s, and it's been remodeled and renovated a number of times. And there's just problems with HVAC system that we're constantly chasing down. And when you have an opportunity to start fresh like this, we just lost power to the apologies for the technical difficulties. Where was I? So we're talking about the efficiency of the building and how that makes for a better user experience, but also, like you said, more space. I did a podcast yesterday with our youth and adult services supervisors who manage all of the community librarians across the district. And that's one thing that we touched on is librarianship has shifted a lot over the last 20 years. And it used to be a lot about being a steward to books. And now it's a lot more about community engagement and community outreach and providing a space for people to learn that's hands-on and gets people inspired to learn and use some of those books, but also just gives them a place to meet and engage with their community. So it's super important that we have that extra space, but like you also mentioned, the additional flexibility allows us to change as the needs of the community change, right, and not be stuck kind of shoehorned into one way of doing things. Our community rooms give us a lot of flexibility that we didn't have before. So that's really exciting. Could you share a little more information about the CMGC process that the library has been using throughout this and what it is and how it's beneficial?
Yeah, so there's different ways that districts have to go about procuring contracts, hiring their general contractor. Mm-hmm. And there's different methods. The CMGC method is a method where you go out and issue an RFP, request for proposal, and in there you describe what you want the CMGC to do. And the idea is to bring them on board early in the process. So we bring the CMGC on board at the start of design, mm-hmm, and they become a team member. And so we've got our design team and we've got our contractor team, and they're highly engaged during design. And what it really lets you do is they have input into how are we designing, what building materials are we thinking about using it. The architect is really creating these great spaces and designing them, but it's with input from ownership as DPL, but also from our CMGC of what materials are local, what materials are available, what's cost effective, and what can we get. Mm-hmm. We really wanted to utilize the timber. We're in Pacific Northwest, love timber. And wanted to go with the mass timber. And so they brought in their ideas and thoughts and worked with our structural engineer and our architect about, okay, how do we build this building and put it together? So it's a real collaborative effort on the selection of process and procedures, details of how we're going to build the building. And that helps the architect in designing it, and the contractor gets input onto that. And that goes on throughout the whole design process, which is a series of progression of how designs are developed, from concept, schematic, to design development, to construction documents, and then we build. So then the other things that they do, they're heavily engaged in our cost estimating. And, throughout the bond program, we've dealt with a high rate of inflation, fluctuations in availability in our markets, the shipping world, going crazy on us. So a lot of variables and factors that impact cost. And so we really worked well together with our CMGCs and our designer to put together budgets for each of our projects and say, here's what we think these need to be, what they should cost. And we used what is called a target value method of establishing a budget and design to the budget so that we don't go way over.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean we didn't have things that went up and down. We did throughout. But as we'd go through each design phase, we'd have a detailed budget phase with it. And the general contractor is giving us detailed cost estimates where they're taking off and making assumptions in the early stages and more detailed later. And then we'd put together ideas. Value engineering is a term that is often used. And it's just, what are ways to accomplish the same goal with a different material, different process to lower cost? What are those alternates and alternatives? And we would do that religiously at each phase. And that way we could adjust our design before we get to the finish. And so they're very heavily engaged in that. And they bring in trade partners, some of our subcontractors that they know and stuff, and that do budgeting for them and offer up ideas as well. And because of their relationships, and that's where that CMGC relationship between the owner really adds lots of value, is because they can reach out to suppliers, to subcontractors, and they know what's going on out there and where that's going to benefit us in our designs. Schedules, long lead times. There's a lot of materials. Right now in the electrical world, switchgear can be out there a year or more out. And so that's something where they bring their expertise and their knowledge of who's out there that they can talk to, electrical subcontractors and supply houses, to find out, okay, what's going on? And if we have this size of equipment, what should we be expecting? And a lot of it is planning for the inevitable. Hey, this is going to take you 20 weeks when you thought it was going to take 10 to get.
Throws your whole schedule off.
Exactly. But if you're constantly checking that, again, through your design process and into your construction and ultimately your procurement. So one of the benefits of the CMGC method is it allows us to, so we established a contract with our CMGC at the beginning. It included pre-construction services during the design phase, but it allows you to add their contract to build up to the final price in segments. So we bought like our DLT, all of this. It had a 14-month delivery time on an 18-month project.
Wow.
And it needed to go in about month 6. So we bought it a year in advance. And the design team worked up enough information in design to let our CMGC go out to the vendor, secure firm pricing based on that design, and get the order in. And sometimes you're getting in line. Sometimes they're buying material that's going to take a while for them to get as a manufacturer to then be able to deliver it on time. And that, same with our electrical. We bought switchgear early so that we could have it on time.
Right.
And those are things, the values at the CMGC. I think the other thing is, and it's something we really try to foster, not just with our CMGC, but with our whole team, is that partnering teamwork relationship. We have team building events and stuff, and it really does foster that. When you come on board, with the goal of let's achieve what the owner, in this case, DPL, wants in an end product. And how do we do that? How do we deliver that to them? And it's a very collaborative approach with the CMGC that works really well with our design team.
And so CMGC, I should have asked you this at the very beginning. What does that acronym stand for?
So CMGC is Construction Manager / General Contractor.
Perfect. So you mentioned the DLT panels and when those arrived.
Yeah.
And that was something really special to watch because we have to understand that building a large building like this is nothing like building a standard house. If you build a stick-built house, a lot of the contractors are working with raw materials on site. Whereas this, we have all these beams and all these ceiling panels that are completely custom. And like you said, you have crazy lead times like that. So it's really impressive to see all of that hard work that's been done in advance come together and see everything come together so smoothly because they knocked this out in a matter of days. And it's because of all the work that went in to collaborating with your CMGC to make that possible. But it's really impressive to watch.
Yeah, one of the things that they do, it's a BIM model, and it's a building information system. And the contractor works with the subcontractors to model all the parts and pieces, utilizing the architect's design, but taking it to another level of how is each thing going to fit together, and are there any conflicts, and especially with this, all these pieces are made in a plant, and they're shipped out, and you don't see them all, but there's all kinds of hidden steel knife plates that go cut into the beams and to the columns to connect them together. And you're right, the idea is you plan it out, you figure those things out, so when it comes out, it's all assembly and putting it together. And this building went up really well, real quick, very, very minor adjustments. Almost, I wouldn't say none, there's always some, but very minor. And it is a very in-depth planning process. And with that CMGC methodology, we were able to start that early. So as the architect is partway complete with their construction documents, which is the documents you use for permitting and then building, we were able to start that BIM process early and get in there and figure out and then collaborate back with our design team of, hey, here's what the contractors are finding. How do we solve this so that when we're ready to go out in the field, we don't have the issues?
Yeah, and I can only imagine, with parts of this building that are exposed, it's really critical that the building goes up fast because it can't be exposed to weather because you have all these beautiful beams. Yeah. That's the finished product right there. There's nothing, there's no way to hide it if something gets messed up. So everything going smoothly on that first phase has to be just
exactly. And you say that one of the things is our CMGC sat down with their trades and with the architect to look at how do we put in a weather barrier protection that will protect the wood before we put on the roof system, and created a whole plan. And again, back to our budgeting and estimating, they budgeted that early on and said, hey, we got to protect this because we don't want it stained from water. We don't want it ruined. We don't want to do it. It's all natural finish. And so that was another one of those things that has really gone into our planning effort to be able to have it budgeted for, planned for, but implemented during the installation to really protect what are going to be fantastic finishes.
Yeah, it's something that's beautiful that everyone who, it doesn't have to be just the contractors, just the people who worked on it, but all of our customers, everybody who gets to enjoy this building also gets to enjoy just the beauty of all this timber.
Exactly.
So you kind of mentioned a lot of this, and you can gloss over this if you want to, because I know we really went deep on the CMGC, but how does your team keep everything organized so things run smoothly both on and off the job site?
Well, I think there's a number of processes and kind of procedures that we like to do. One is there's a certain amount of a rigor approach to how we go about it. We have a very detailed development schedule. So this isn't how we're going to build the building. It is how are we going to organize and plan our activities. And that's our design, our permitting, our procurement, our bidding and activities, and it's construction. It is FF&E. We have a huge amount of FF&E going into these buildings, and that's furniture, fixtures, as in shelving, lots of shelving, our early learning components. So all of those go into it. So we create a master development schedule, and it has every library on it in detail. It's over 1,000 activities. It's huge. And this is something that when DPL brought us on in the beginning, we started creating this document because we had to have a roadmap. I asked them, when do you want it done? And they said, DPL said, well, we brought you on board to tell us, when can we get it done? And so we created this master schedule. But that's the foundation, right, of what is our plan. And it lays out all of our procurement, whether it's the RFQs and RFPs for the design team, the RFPs for the CMGCs, and a bunch of other specialty consultants that we've brought on board. And it lays out the design process. So we work with the architect and say, look, from the very start of creating ideas and concepts to giving us a set of plans that we can build from, we have to have a plan to get there. And that outlines that. We build those into our contracts so that the team knows what's expected of them. Always trying to make sure they know the expectations and what the goals are. And then just a regular, constant discussion and meetings. We have a lot of meetings, but they have purpose. And it is to make sure people are informed and decisions are being made and people are being allowed to advance their work, whatever their work may be, whether it's design or construction.
Right.
And so I think those are really important, and they're very collaborative meetings. We use technology. They can be Zoom meetings, they can in person or a combination. But it really allows all of the team members to come in, talk about what issues they may have, concerns they may have. They're very open. Building teamwork and collaborative environments with really good communication. People got to be able to talk about what's going on, ask their questions, and get answers and direction. And we think that's something that's super important. We talk about communication all the time. We just had a pre-bid meeting and for our CMGC package for downtown Bend, and told the bidders, we said, look, communication is one of our #1 things because it's what's keeping us healthy and working well together. And I think that's a lot of what is, there's probably more parts and pieces. Doing detailed reviews of our design. So we review in detail the designs at every course. So schematic, DD, all the way through. And it consumes a lot of DPL's time. The staff, there's a lot of people that give input into those designs, but we have to do it every time, and we have to look at it and give the design team feedback. They like this, they don't like that. We want more of this, or can we change this?
Right.
And the goal is to create a set of construction documents the contractor can go build with as few of changes in the field as possible. Changes usually relate to added cost and time extensions, which are inevitable. You always have them, but you want to minimize them and you want to control them. So,
especially with, I know it's so important to have staff feedback because DPL staff are the ones who interact with customers. But with everything happening on time and happening in sequence and trying to catch problems before they become actual problems, DPL is unique in that we have a floating collection. So all of our library branches are kind of, they rely on each other because you can access any book, any material from any branch at any time. So we can't just shut down all the branches and do a whole big construction project and knock it out in a year or two. It's like it has to happen in stages like that so that we can continue offering service to all of our communities. And so having a big issue that pops up and sets back construction, I mean, that's just another week, another month, another year that customers don't have access to the resource that we're trying to improve for them. So it's just so impressive to hear about how many times you go back and review the same documents just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and an issue that wasn't a problem last week that's a problem now gets caught before it balloons.
Yeah.
So whether you're renovating or building new, you've touched on this a little bit, but construction materials are a part of the process no matter what. And with, kind of mentioned this earlier as well, all the supply chain issues we've had over the last couple of years in this country, mostly due to COVID, or exacerbated by COVID. How do you manage that, and then also still stick with using locally sourced materials from the Northwest?
Yeah, it starts with our design team understanding our goals, which goes back to the communication, right, of what we want to achieve in utilizing local materials. When we chose to go LEED on the new buildings, LEED promotes utilization of local materials also. But it was an overriding goal as, hey, that's something we really want to do. We're not going to get 100%, especially here in Central Oregon. We have to reach out and get materials. But it was something that the design team was very conscientious about in developing their designs. Our CMGCs are very valuable in talking to them about what materials we use all the time locally here that are readily available, cost effective, good for our environment. We have a very different environment here as compared to what's in the valley of Oregon or what's over on the coast, right? And they very different here environmentally of what the conditions we got to deal with. And so we take that into consideration by that collaboration between the teams of what have they seen and what have they done here. Our design team is made up of a partnership of Miller Hall Architects out of Seattle and Steel Architects out of Bend here. And so that brings knowledge that both of them have to really think about those things. But, when we're looking at sourcing materials, a lot of it is done by our CMGC and talking with the subs out there and what they've seen and used and the lead times of what's going on. That is something we have to deal with all the time. I was in an OAC, an owner's architect contractor meeting today, and we were talking about lead times on materials for this building and where were we at. And they were tracking each thing that was ordered. So there's a lot of effort put in by the team to track things as they progress through design, through construction, and ordering them and getting them in. Another big impact here is the impact on our trades and our tradesmen. So these buildings get built by tradesmen, the guys who are pounding nails and the wiring up panels, all of these guys, they're the workers, the core. And throughout Central Oregon, we're growing fast. There's a large volume of construction, and there's a large demand on our subcontracting community for their time and their efforts. And we deal as much with our labor factor as we do with our material factor of impacts to cost and availability and schedule. And so that's something that we really have to look at to make sure we're matching up bid packages for our subcontractors and our material suppliers.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody can relate to that. Trying to find a contractor, depending on the job and depending on the time of year, can be a really big challenge. And so I'm sure, especially when it comes to a project of this scale,
back to the CMGC method, we actually bid and awarded some packages early to be able to lock in our subcontractor to get on their schedule so they could do our project, because there's so much work out there. Ultimately, they get to a point where they have to say, sorry, I can't take any more. And so there's competition for that labor, for those subcontractors to do the job. And you have to be thinking about that and planning for it. And that's something that we do in that planning process throughout the life of the project.
Yeah, one little schedule blip can really snowball in this type of industry, huh? So with, you touched on this earlier, but with new libraries like the Redmond branch and the Central Library at Stevens Ranch having such an emphasis on windows to bring in natural light and views, What's being done to make sure those buildings are still energy efficient?
Yeah. So, I think as they designed these buildings, they start out with daylight studies that really it determines, well, what's the optimal place to position the building on site to deal with sunlight, whether it's morning light, midday, or evening light. They do these studies that study where's the sun all year long and at what time of the day. And so that helps them look at the basic design of the building, of how do they capture natural light that we want in, but also control that light from making it, how do we shade it and keep that in. So as they develop the skin, the exterior of the buildings, they are looking at what composition it's going to be made up of, solid wall versus glass and glazing walls, and what's the percentage. And there's somewhat of a formula that they go through, because they, from a design planning aspect, you got to have a certain mix there. And that also helps with the performance of the building, its energy efficiency. So it's dual pane glass, some of it's triple pane glass, so it's really energy efficient in the system of the windows and the type of glass, the coatings that go on to help deal with UV rays and absorption and loss, but also in our heating system, of the design of the mechanical system, of how that air comes out from our floors and goes up and gets back into the system. So it's really a combination of all of those elements. We look at window blinds. Where do we need window blinds and how much and everything? And most of the windows will have that from a shading coefficient. It's really there. It's the from a light standpoint versus an energy standpoint.
Yeah, you can see some of those window shades, that style I'm sure you're talking about, that's in downtown Bend. But I happen to live here in Redmond, and I'm actually on the grid that runs north-south here. So I have a very intimate relationship. I know exactly what the sun does in the winter and in the summer. And one of the cool things I've noticed about this building is it has that awning over it. And so right now in the wintertime, you can see all around us, there's all this light coming in when it's cold outside. You want that light. But in the summertime, if you have light beaming through the window, it's hot. And the path of the sun is a lot higher in the summertime, so you have this awning just blocking that light, so you get the ambient light, but you don't get the direct sunlight that just causes that heat gain.
Well, and that's really true. The size of that awning, that overhang, and at Central Library, there's, especially on the west side, there's angled walls. It's not a flat wall, but angled, it's segmented. And those angles, both of these elements were developed through the sunlight study models of the angle that the sun is going to hit the wall and what can we use in the building to shade the building, which reduces, glare and sunlight, but also heat gain. And so the building is helping itself. And those are built in on both of these new buildings extensively.
Yeah, it's just so cool when you can find a solution that doesn't involve anything mechanical. It's all just how things are positioned, how things are angled to kind of optimize. So I think that's a really cool feature of the newer buildings. So you have a long career in construction. What do you think the impact of these new and renovated spaces will be on the community here in Deschutes County?
Oh man, I think it's going to be incredible. I really do. New buildings bring life to buildings as you renovate them and refresh them, and people come back in and reuse them. And I think it's really important. You see it all the time in the renovation of old buildings. And that's like our sisters in Sun River, Lapine, and even downtown Bend, where, as they age, they are not as fun and attractive to people and for users. But on top of that, so just the refresh of it's fresh and new, but new technology, new uses, and looking at how are these buildings set up to promote the use of the library system for its users as we go forward. And I really think that those refreshes are very, very necessary. I think the MEP system upgrades of better, higher quality lighting and higher quality air control systems create an environment that we're looking for. We talked about smoke right? We deal with our fires and stuff. And so our systems are designed to try and minimize and keep as much of that smoke out. So it's a clean, healthy environment. And I think that creates spaces that people want to be in and enjoy it. And besides coming for their collection and finding their favorite book and finding a chair to sit and read, they're going to enjoy the environment that they're in. And it's even more so with the new buildings, right? You get to create a whole new space. Redmond, we're right down here on the main plaza. We're going to be a fixture in this community. The libraries, I've learned so much about them working with them, of all the things that they do that I did not know they do for the community, and the services they provide, the programs they provide. And we're creating these spaces that lets the district do so much more, and more of it, more in quantity, more facilities to offer to the public. And it's all open, right? It's free. Come and get it.
Yep.
And so it's going to be exciting. I think that people are going to find these spaces to be wonderful spots to be in with a lot of great services, and know that the dollars that they approved is really creating these great environments and buildings that are going to last a long time. And that was something we talked about, creating, spending the money wisely in the bond and creating these great spaces that really sets the district up for a long term. So over the next 25 to 50 years, they can continue with the growing community that we have and continue to provide their services. I just think these are wonderful buildings that really do fit in, using the natural woods. And a lot of the materials really work to say, this is a Central Oregon building.
And, talking about all of the books, talking about all the spaces, all the services that will be offered here, they're all free with your library card, and they're libraries are for everybody. It doesn't matter what your financial status is, what your political affiliation is, where you are in your life. The library is there for everybody, no matter your background. So I think it's just an invaluable resource to the community. But Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this with us. I think it's fascinating to me, and I hope that it's informative to our customers about all the library construction and renovation projects happening across the district. If you'd like to learn more about the construction projects happening across Deschutes County, go to deschuteslibrary.org/futurelibraries. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next one.